Hey guys, Willie Mayette, creator of JAZZEDGE, and I want to welcome you to episode 29 of the Confident Improviser. So today we're going to be talking about the core practice material that you need as an improviser. So this is the material that you need to practice if you want to become an incredible improviser. Now this podcast is designed to go along with the Confident Improviser program, which is found at JAZZEDGE. You can just go back to jazzedge.com for more information. All right, so core practice material for improvisers. Everything that I'm going to mention, all of the courses that I'm going to mention in this podcast are all available as part of my JAZZEDGE core, which is found exclusively only at jazzedge.com. And if you want full access to JAZZEDGE core, that is for JAZZEDGE members, limited access for my Noble Piano members. All right, so the very first thing is technique. You need to have good technique in order to be able to express yourself at the instrument. If you don't have good technique, then the ideas that you have in your head, the ideas that you hear in your head, hear in your ears, you're not going to be able to get them out at the instrument. So you can think about technique as being able to actually speak the words that are in your brain, right? If you can't actually speak those words and put those words together in a way that makes sense, then it's going to be very, very difficult for you to be able to communicate. Same thing goes at the piano as well. You need to have good technique, and where we start is with Piano Essentials. That is the course that you want to take a look at, and one of the main things you want to really pay attention to is my grab technique, right? And the grab technique is where you're grabbing in at the notes versus pushing at the notes. This is one of the things that's a little bit different from my program than many other online piano programs, is that I'm actually going to show you technique. I'm going to show you the mechanics of how to play the piano properly so that you're able to play faster, more fluid, and most importantly, not hurt yourself at the instrument. Number two, major scales. Major scales, you can think of that as the lifeblood of improvisation, and it's the foundation for improv regardless of any style. If I'm going to improvise over, like a pop rock tune, I can bring in my major scales there and start to use them for improvisation. So I could use my C major scale, my B flat major scale there. Now, bear in mind, the major scale is not going to work 100% of the time, but it's where we start because so often, especially when playing songs that have multiple chords in them or songs that are diatonic, and don't worry if you don't know what diatonic means, it's all explained at JAZZEDGE. But if you do, you know that when progressions all stay diatonic or they're all within a key, you could utilize that major scale. And I have lessons on the site in which I've talked about how we've been able to improvise over a jazz standard or a song. About 75% of the song, the major scale works. So it's super important that you learn those major scales. And the major scales are also a great way in which you're able to improve that technique. Again, that course is all part of Piano Essentials. The next thing that you have to learn is style, right? So if you don't know different styles, like if I want to do like a, right, or I want a rock kind of style, or if I want maybe a jazz style, right? Or a bossa nova. Right? Or I want funk. Or I want more of that nice flowing. Right? All of those styles that I just played are all found in Chord Essentials. And in Chord Essentials, that's where you're working on different styles, different ways of forming the chord, and most importantly, different rhythmic elements. This is a key component to improvisation, is learning to improve your rhythm. Chord Essentials is the course that you want to take a look at. There's a bunch of different rhythmic styles in there and different progressions and different, styles that you can work off of and utilize them both as intros as endings, and also as fodder for your improvisation. So super, super important. The next thing is other scales and techniques. Okay, so now obviously we're not going to just use our major scale. We need to learn other scales like blues scales, altered scales, Lydian flat 7, Locrian natural 9, diminished, whole tone, enclosures, a technique like enclosures, neighbor tones, chromatic scale, all of those other scales you need to also work on and develop those scales as well. Now the challenge has been that learning all of those scales, if you're going to learn them in all 12 keys, you take each one of those and you do the math very, very quickly. You could end up having to learn hundreds of scales. So this is where the Confident Improviser comes into play. The Confident Improviser is a course that I put together that really steps you through improvisation and gives you all of the material that you need to be able to improvise over, okay? And you need for your raw material for improvisation in a step-by-step manner. So even if you're a complete beginner to improvisation, the Confident Improviser gives you those techniques and tools that you need. Now, the other thing that you're going to need is repertoire. You need songs to improvise over. If you don't know repertoire, you don't have any repertoire down, you don't have any songs underneath your fingertips, well, then you're really not going to be able to improvise either, because our improvisation, by and large, most of the time, is done over songs or over progressions. All right, so again, you find some of that in the Confident Improviser. We start with some of those simple progressions, but then we move on to full standards in Standards by the Dozen, and that's the course that you want to take a look at if you want to start to learn how to improvise over standards. And then finally, you need feedback. And this, again, is something else that it's unfortunate that a lot of students don't realize that as a JAZZEDGE member, you get to be online with me every single week. And every week, I am giving feedback to students. I've been doing this for years. I'm continuing to do this. So feedback is the way that you get better at your instrument, right? And I'm not talking about feedback just using like a forum, or a community forum, something like that. Now, we have that as well at JAZZEDGE. But the reality is that, typing in your questions and uploading a video that way and then me typing back a response, really what you need from your teacher, me, is you need me to be able to play something based on what you just played, right? And that's what you get every week in the coaching sessions at JAZZEDGE. So all of this is found as part of JAZZEDGE Core, all right? And that's what I really wanted to take the time today in this episode to talk about is JAZZEDGE Core. In JAZZEDGE Core, you have 6 courses that have been carefully put together to help you find success at the piano. Now, even if you're not interested in improvising, maybe you just want to get better at the piano and be able to play some standards or, be able to fiddle around or play some rock pop tunes or accompany yourself while singing. Or maybe you really want to be able to sit down and be able to take a standard. Like, take Misty. You want to be able to sit down, you want to be able to fool around with that tune, and you want to be able to create your own improvisation. Well, that is all found at JAZZEDGE Core. In fact, Misty is one of the tunes that we do in Standards by the Dozen. There are 6 courses that are included in JAZZEDGE Core. The first one is my 30-day piano playbook. That's the first course you should take a look at. So if you're kind of brand new to the piano, it goes through and steps you through a lot of important information just to make sure that you're starting off on the right foot. Then we move on to Piano Essentials. And as I've talked about in this podcast episode, Piano Essentials are extremely important. I created my Piano Essentials program years ago, and I've been really just tweaking it and making it the best possible program that it can be to make sure that you learn not just your scales, but you also learn chords. and chord tension. So you learn your chords, you learn your chord tensions, you understand some of these basic progressions. Then we move on to chord essentials. Chord essentials is where you learn all of those different styles that I was playing and those different chords and rhythms that you need. Then we have piano accompaniment essentials, which is going to be a brand new course starting in 2021. And piano accompaniment essentials is going to be where I'm going to show you different accompaniment techniques and how the left hand and right hand work together. Super important. It's not just about learning chords in the left hand, and you've probably realized it as well. If you kind of take a look at YouTube and take a look at a bunch of other instructional videos, you'll see that it's more than just learning like, okay, like I just learned that to that to that to that. It's a little bit more involved than that, right? It's different styles. It's not just knowing what the chord is, it's knowing stylistically how do you add style to that chord and rhythm to that chord to make it sound like it should? That's what you're going to be learning in Piano Accompaniment Essentials. And then my two flagship courses, the Confident Improviser, which you probably already know about if you've been listening to this podcast, and then Standards by the Dozen. Confident Improviser, like I said, steps you through improvisation one step at a time. Even if you've never improvised a note in your life, I can guarantee you that in the Confident Improviser, you are going to learn how to improvise. How I do that is, first of all, 20 plus years teaching online, and then 30 plus years teaching in general. I have created a program based on decades of experience teaching thousands of students, right? And what I've done is I've codified that program into the Confident Improviser, and there are two tracks that you can follow. Number one is you just do the exercises, and that's fine. You can just go through the exercises. They're laid out step by step, but then for those of you that want a little bit more, I have an inspiration lesson that is available as part of each one of the Confident Improviser lessons, right? And in the inspiration lesson, I give you some advanced techniques. So if you're a more advanced player, those inspiration lessons are going to prove invaluable to you and your playing because you're going to learn techniques that you're probably not going to learn anywhere else. And then finally, Standards by the Dozen. All throughout the year of 2021, Standards by the Dozen is teaching you a brand new standard every month. Now, we're not just talking about the standard. It's not like we're just analyzing the standard and saying, hey, look, you can use, this scale there. No. You end up learning how to play the standard from a lead sheet. You end up understanding chord shells. You end up understanding rootless chord voicings. You end up understanding how to play two-handed comping. You also understand how to create a bass line so that you can play that bass line and start to improvise over the top of it. So let me give you a quick, for instance here. So here I have the first part of the fourth standard in Standards by the Dozen, which is The Way You Look Tonight. And for those of you that can't see the music on the screen right now, the chords are F major 7 for one measure, D minor 7 for one measure, G minor 7 for a measure, C7 for a measure. Then we go to A minor 7 flat 5 for a measure, D7 flat 9 for a measure, G minor 7 for a measure, and C7 for a measure. We're just going to do those first 8 measures. Now take a listen. I'm going to play these rootless chord voicings down here. All of this is all taught in Standards by the Dozen. So if you're a member of JAZZEDGE, you haven't checked out Standards by the Dozen, I would definitely suggest taking a look at it. And in the right hand, I'm going to show you how I can utilize that major scale to start my improvisation. So here we go. All right, so, that's fine. It's a basic improvisation. Now I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to start to bring in some of these other scales. All right, so now you can hear with those other scales, it starts to sound, well, pardon the pun, but it starts to sound more jazzy, right? It sounds more like what a jazz trio or a jazz pianist would be playing. Some of those other scales are like what I was talking about, the altered scale, the whole tone scale, the half-whole diminished scale. Those are the types of scales that really make your playing shine. Those are the scales that make you sound like a real jazz player. All of that is found in JAZZEDGE Core. Now, what you will find is that I'm going to be talking more about JAZZEDGE Core, and I'm going to be talking more about how you can start to combine these elements together in this TCI podcast, right? To really try and give you some real-world information and techniques and different practice tips that you can utilize to be able to improvise over these standards. Remember, if you're not interested in jazz, it's still great to improvise over these standards and improvise over these different progressions. Why? Well, number one, if you're going to go out and you're going to play, right, and you're just playing in like a wedding band or a pop rock band, well, a lot of times you will be put in a situation which you might have to play a cocktail hour, right, at a wedding. And it's like, hey, can you play some jazz tunes? Or can you Fly Me to the Moon? Can you play, Misty? These are standards that people know and they love. So being able to have the skills to be able to improvise over those songs and be able to play those songs, super, super important, right? But then the other thing is, we start with the jazz improvisation because if you can learn how to improvise over jazz and blues, well, guess what? You could really learn how to improvise over any style. Reason is that other styles typically do not utilize as many different scales and techniques in their improvisation. So if I'm going to improvise over, say, a rock tune, you're going to find that I might just use like a pentatonic scale. Don't worry, we're going to talk about all of that in the Confident Improviser, right? But I might just be utilizing one scale, a pentatonic scale, a minor pentatonic scale, right? So if you can understand and know how to improvise over standards, utilizing the Confident Improviser and standards by the dozen, then you will also be able to improvise over other styles of music. In the Confident Improviser, we are going to start to move into other styles as well, right? So if you're more interested in funk or rock or really blues, then those styles are going to be covered also, right? So JAZZEDGE Core, super, super important and a super simple way of being able to sit down and knowing exactly what to practice. For those of you that could see the video here, you see that this is a screenshot right from the JAZZEDGE dashboard. It's super simple for JAZZEDGE students and no bowl piano students to be able to just click on a course, choose the lesson right from the drop down, goes right to the lesson, you download the sheet music, you can watch the videos, and then if you have questions, every other Thursday I do my Confident Improviser Q&A session, right? And that's a Confident Improviser and Standards by the Dozen Q&A session. And every Tuesday, I do my online weekly coaching. So every week, you can join in on coaching. And then every other week, there's also another bonus Q&A session. So a lot of information here, a lot to think about. So let's just go through this one last time just to make sure and just kind of wrap up and make sure that, I'm giving you some valuable information here. So if you want to be a better piano player and a better improviser, you need to get down your technique first, right? So make sure that you're practicing those scales, make sure that you're understanding the grab technique, right? And go through and make sure that you're practicing all of those major scales. After that, then you need to work on styles, right? And you need to understand different styles, so that's where Chord Essentials comes in. From there, you learn other scales and other techniques, enclosures, neighbor tones, half-whole scales, etc., right? That's all found in the Confident Improviser. And then you need your repertoire to improvise over, right? So now this could be your own repertoire, but if you want repertoire that's all been laid out step by step for you, all the sheet music all written out for you, fingering, all of that good stuff, then that is all in Standards by the Dozen. And finally, you need feedback, right? So if you're not part of a program in which you are getting live feedback from a teacher, I'm not talking about a forum, right? We have that too, but I'm talking about live feedback from an actual teacher. If you're not getting that live feedback, then I would consider and I would encourage you to really think about, are you really hitting your piano goals? If you're hitting your piano goals, great, then keep doing what you're doing. But if you find that I'm just not there yet. I'm just not, I've been playing for a while. I feel like I should be better ahead. I feel like I'm stuck. I feel like there's still stuff that I want to be able to learn, but I'm just not learning it. If any of those, questions, you have, then that probably means that you need feedback on your playing. And then, like I said, that's all part of JAZZEDGE Core, and you can join me every week for coaching and every other week for the Confident Improviser and Standards by the Dozen Q&A sessions. All right, so that's it for me. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thanks for joining me. We've got a lot of cool stuff coming up on the podcast, so be sure to hit that subscribe button. And you know what? If you don't mind doing me a favor, leave a review. It would be great, right? If you got something nice to say, I would love to see it in the podcast area, so go ahead and leave a review. All right, that's it from me, guys. Thanks a lot. I'll see you at Jazz Edge.